So February 11th, that's today, 11th of Adar 1, Social Justice Shabbat with guest speaker Lee Winkleman. The Parsha is Tetzaveh, and we're going to be talking about creating and sustaining voting justice for all people. I'm going to welcome Susan Solars to bring in the lights of Shabbat. And I have candles too by me. If anybody else has candles, you can light them at home, or you can enjoy and take in the energy of those of us who are lighting tonight. If you're able to stand, please do. I'll adjust my screen.
Can you see me?
No,
we're seeing this. We're not seeing me.
Rick, can you make it happen so that Susan is right there? I see you.
Okay. All right. No.
It takes some time. You know, it's a tricky thing.
Sometimes things don't work exactly according to plan.
That's what makes it life.
Candle's not cooperating. There we go. Triumph. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Take a moment to send love to those that are dear to your heart, whether they're with you in the room or elsewhere. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Bruce, for bringing in Shabbat. So now that we've lit the candles, we sing the Sabbath Bride's favorite song. Many melodies tonight. We'll keep it a little bit simple. Lechatudi likrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmianu el hamichad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'litchila. Lechatudi likrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. Lechatudi likrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki hi mekor habracha, Mirosh mikedem misucha, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila. Lechatudi likrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. לחדתי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נתקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. We stand to welcome the Sabbath bride, facing the door. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי קלה בואי קלה. פני שבת נקבלה. Please be seated. Before we have our first reading, just Rick, I think I'd like to just introduce the theme of the service. There you go. Thank you. So getting involved in social justice can be overwhelming. There are so many causes that a person can get behind, a variety of movements, tricky vocabulary words, big names to know, and that can make it difficult to know where we should start. But that shouldn't prevent any of us from joining a movement that revolves around an issue that we're passionate about, and the first step is showing up. And so in that spirit, I thank all of you tonight for showing up for our social justice Shabbat service. Each month, and last month there were 2 of them, we have the opportunity to show up and learn about contemporary issues that are relevant, substantial, and Jewish at the core. Tonight's theme revolves around voting rights, and this is paramount to our democracy. By looking away, even for a moment, we can stumble, fall into an abyss where significant numbers of our citizens are unable to participate in the voting process. This Shabbat service will shed light on the importance of everyone voting from Jewish and American perspectives. It will give guidance on how we can get involved. Our social action Shabbat, especially this one, is meant to be a wake-up call, and in some cases to disturb us and to keep us vigilant. Purity of process is the link between the theme of voting rights and this week's Parsha, Tetzaveh. The construction of the Mishkan has been completed, and now the Torah turns to the way the Ner Tamid should be lit. The Ner Tamid is the eternal light, and in the time of the Torah, it was a continuous light referred to also as the menorah. It was not to be filled with just any kind of olive oil. It had to be pure. It was meticulous. Everyone would see that menorah shining, and it was a beacon of holiness. That pure oil, that pressed olive oil, and the overseeing of who was lighting it and their integrity was done by priests, Kohanim, people of the highest character. The Parsha begins with the command from God about the quality of paying attention. The oil had to be shemen zayit, purest oil, zach katit lamaor, laha'alot ner tamid, pressed olive oil for illumination, to kindle Haftal, the Holy Ner Tamid. So this paying attention to detail and honoring the steps that must be done is the link between the Parsha and our topic tonight of voting rights. We are grateful that we will hear from Lee Winkleman, Associate Director of Organizing for the Religious Action Center. Lee, we are honored that you're with us tonight. And we thank our social action co-chairs, Dr. Lucy Ezralu and Susan Solars. I thank you for your commitment to providing excellence month after month for our social action Shabbat services. You and your loyal committee are bringing in outstanding speakers. So I pray that this Shabbat invigorates your mind and your spirit and shines a light on your engagement. And together we say, Amen. Our first reading I'm going to give to Lois Brown. And this teaching is by Rabbi Dara Lithwick. Lois, would you please unmute and read reading 1? Are you there? There you are. You just need to unmute. There you go.
Okay.
Go for it.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Okay. Judaism teaches us that voting is not just a civic duty. In fact, throughout Jewish history, many of our rabbis and sages have framed voting as a mitzvah, a Jewish imperative. Our tradition views us as working in partnership with God to create a better world, as we pray in the Aleinu prayer. Latikam olam malchut shadeh. The Torah calls on us to pursue justice, to care for the stranger, the widow, and the orphan, and to sustain our world. We are further taught to choose life so that you and your children may live. Deuteronomy 30. Choosing life is a positive action, reminding us that we have to make choices to create the world we want to live in. Voting in a democratic society is such an example of making a choice. Rabbi Yitzchak taught that a ruler is not to be appointed unless the community is first consulted. Further explaining that in the Torah, Bezalel could be chosen to build, I'm sorry, my dog is barking, could be chosen to build the tabernacle only with the community's approval. This deeply embedded ethic of political participation has guided Jews to enthusiastically participate in the democratic process. Rabbi Dara Lithwick.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lois. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך ירטה וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בישראל. בגלה ובזמן קריב, ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי קדושה בריחו, לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעלמא, ויאמרו אמן. Please stand for the Baruch Hu if you're able. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Borei yom v'layla, golela mipnei choshech, golela mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Continue from basking in the miracle of being present to creation and seasons changing as God is creator. We move into Avat Olam that reminds us that God, the creator, however we envision that to be, has loves each of us and has given us Torah as a treasure, as a means of getting close to God through learning. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael, Amacha ahavta, Amcha ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu lemadita, Otanu lemadita. Akein Adonai Eloheinu v'shochbeinu, Kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayeinu, ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nege yomam v'layla, nege yomam v'layla. V'ahavatcha al tasir, mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael, ohev amo Yisrael. If you're able to stand, please do so for Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please be seated. I think V'ahavta would be next. Can we find the V'ahavta, Rick? There you go. Thank you. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha בכל לבבך, בכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך. ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך. וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Reading 2, Rick? Thank you. Trying to think who's on the call. David Bories. If you're there, could you read Reading 2 by Jeremiah?
Jeremiah wrote during the exile to Babylonia, we are to engage deeply in the communities where we find ourselves, to build houses and put down roots, and to seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you and pray to God in its behalf. For it's in its prosperity you shall prosper.
Thank you. Thank you. And Reading 3. Donna, are you on the call? Huckabee?
Yes.
Would you read this kind of interesting teaching by the Chazon Ish, how important it is for us to vote?
So reading number 3.
Yes, please.
Contemporary Rabbi David Russo shared the story of a man who came before the Chazon Ish, a Russian-born Orthodox rabbi who spent his later years in Palestine, Israel, 1878 through 1953, to explain that he didn't have enough money to pay his taxes. Therefore, he would not be allowed to vote in an upcoming election. Hearing the man's dilemma, the Chazon Ish responded, "You should sell your tefillin and pay the taxes. Tefillin you can borrow from another, but the right to vote you cannot get from someone else."
Right. So, tefillin is considered very sacred, right? Ritual object. But the Chazon Ish, this great rabbi, said, you do what you got to do to make sure that you vote, because that whoever's in charge of our government either allows us to live in freedom or not. So thank you for reading that, how important it is for us to vote. So here we have Micha Mocha crossing the Red Sea. Looks pretty fierce out there, doesn't it, with that water? So whatever challenges are before you in your personal life, we ask for the courage of this chant, Micha Mocha, to help us make some headway in crossing to the other side. Micha Mocha ba'elim Adonai, Micha Mocha ne'eda b'kodesh. Nora tehilot, osef eleh, Nora tehilot, osef eleh. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bokeh yam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ze lianu ve'ameru. Adonai yimloch, Adonai yimloch, le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar, כי פרענה את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה, אדוני, גאל ישראל. So, we're Jews. We celebrate Shabbat. And we've done it for a very, very long time. And we have celebrated Shabbat in times when it wasn't safe for us as Jewish people to celebrate Shabbat, and we persisted. Sometimes we had to hide. A lot of times we did. And we continue to celebrate Shabbat through COVID. We've learned how to create Shabbat and sacred spaces on our laptops. The people of Israel shall keep Shabbat. We observe it throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It is a sign for all time between God and us. In 6 days, God made heaven on earth, and on the seventh day, God ceased from work and was refreshed. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת, שבת וינפש, שבת, שבת וינפש, שבת, שבת וינפש. We begin to prepare for tefillah. If you're able to stand, we stand for the Amidah. It's a standing prayer. And we will chant in the sanctuaries that we've created at home. And then we will have an opportunity for sitting quietly. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibur v'Hanurah, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, וחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני בחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יעלוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני Ha'el HaKadosh. You are holy. Your name is holy. And those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'amecha Yisrael, Utefilatam B'ahava Tekabel, Utahil Ratzon, Tamid Avodat Yisrael, Yisrael Amecha. Baruch atah Adonai She'otecha levadecha b'yira navod navod navod. I'm going to invite this slide to stay where it's at and invite all of us to be seated and to sit quietly before we do our Mishaberach. So let's take a few moments to have our feet grounded on the ground if we can. Close our eyes. Take some deep breaths. I'm sure that we can all relate to the fact that this week went very quickly. There were a lot of moving parts, and we're all doing our best. But right now, our job is to breathe and to be grateful for our ability our bodies to take in air and to have it circulate in our bodies and to exhale. So just take a few moments of some really conscious breathing. Such a miracle. Each month, our community is asked to submit names of people they're praying for. And then we start again at the beginning of each month. Actually, we'll go right there. So I know that there are others in our community who are in need of healing, but starting this month, we're praying with all our heart for Maggie Verano and Penny Clark and Rick Miller. And I'm going to ask you to please share. You can in the chat, and then I can read those names out loud for all of us so that we can pray together. Nina Schneider, Barbara Lander, Niner Gabrielli, Stan Phillip, Carol Trachtenberg, Vimala Rajavelu, Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Ve'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah, Hu Yivarech et kol hacholim, Hu Yivarech otam Refuah Shlema, Refuat HaNefesh U'Refuat HaGuf, v'chol cholei b'Yisrael, v'kol ha'olam v'nomar amen. May the Holy One who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel, bless our dear ones who are in need of healing. May God bless them with a complete healing of their spirit and of their body amongst the household of Israel and all the world. And together we say, Amen. Peace. Peace will come, and let it begin with me. We need peace. Let it begin with me. Oh, my own life is all I can hope to control. Let my life be lived for the good of our souls. Let it bring peace, sweet peace. Peace will come. Let it begin with me. Oh, say shalom. Oh, say shalom biroma. Let it begin with me. Oh, my own life is all I can hope to control. Let my life be lived for the good of our souls. Let there be peace. Peace will come. Let it begin with me. From the Reformed Jewish Platform, in full accordance with the spirit of the Mosaic legislation, which strives to regulate the relations between rich and poor, we deem it our duty to participate in the great task of modern times, to solve on the basis of justice and righteousness the problems presented by the contrasts and evils of the present organization of society. We bring Torah into the world when we strive to fulfill the highest ethical mandates in our relationship with others and with all of God's creation. Partners with God in Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, we are called to help bring near the Messianic age. We seek dialogue and joint action with people of other faiths in the hope that together we can bring peace, freedom, and justice to our world. And so with that kavanah, with that intention, I'd like to invite our co-chair, Dr. Lucy Israelu, to give the introduction for tonight's speaker. Lucy?
Yes, thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to welcome Lee Winkleman, who is the RAC Associate Director of Organizing. He's been a field team organizer for the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism since 2015. In this role, he provides coaching to congregations on their social justice work, coordinates statewide efforts to pass policies that reflect Jewish values, and provides support for RAC national campaigns. Lee grew up in the Reform movement in Pontiac, Michigan, and has been a community organizer since 1986 in Boston, San Salvador, Brooklyn, and Los Angeles. Lee spearheaded social justice efforts of 2 synagogues as a lay leader and wrote about organizing for social justice inside and outside the Jewish community. Lee lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Wendy, and 18-year-old son, Henry. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm reminded of the most important words about prayer on Zoom, which are please mute if you are not speaking and please unmute if you are speaking. So with those spiritual words, I will just jump in. Now, normally I start by telling my story about what you heard a little bit about how I grew up in the Detroit suburbs and how I became a community organizer. But today I just want to tell the story about the time I spent in El Salvador. I was lucky enough to spend 2 years in El Salvador from 92 through 94 when El Salvador was coming out of a really brutal civil war that killed just tens and tens of thousands of people in this small country. And they were preparing for their first ever election in this country that all sides could participate in, that everyone could vote in. So it was really the first free election this country ever had. And I was working with them and training them. I was working with people who never had any experience voting, really. And so I was like teaching them that you could actually go door to door and talk to people about the candidates and the election and the issues involved. And they were like, really? And they won't kill us? But they had, they worked out they worked out the truce, they worked out civil society. They could go door to door. And it was so inspiring to see people who had never voted before doing what felt really dangerous to them, like going out and talking about it and actually going out and voting. And it made me appreciate, what we sometimes take for granted in our country. So I'm lucky enough to work for the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. As many of you know, this is the social justice arm of the Reform movement that we're all part of. And the RAC has been around for 60 years, and we've worked on a ton of issues over time. We've worked on voting rights was one of our first issues that we worked on. Our office in Washington, D.C. was, when we got our building back in around 1960, I guess, it became the office of Martin Luther King Jr. when he was in D.C. And we worked with a lot of the civil rights groups. The text of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was written on our conference table of our office, and our people in our congregations across the country were involved in helping to pass on this. So working for voting rights is not a new thing for the reform movement. It's something that we've been doing for years. More recently, in 2020, some of you were part of probably the big effort to reach out to voters and make sure that everyone voted. We had 15,000 leaders in the reform movement across this country. Raise your hand if you were one of them, who maybe filled out a postcard or made a phone call, right? I'm sure some of you on this call were. 15,000 leaders who reached out to 775,000 voters in 2020. So this is something that we care about deeply. And the reason we care about it, there are several reasons. We heard some of this in our teachings tonight. The first is that one person, one vote is really the bedrock of our democracy, right? If people don't have equal access to vote, then the whole basis for our democracy starts to crumble, right? And we know this is a racial justice issue. African Americans and other people of color have been denied the equal right to vote since the beginning of the country. First as slaves, African Americans couldn't vote. Then when the amendment to allow African Americans to vote passed, still couldn't vote because there were poll taxes, there was all sorts of Jim Crow regulations, there was violence and intimidation, there was lynching, a systematic terrorism, basically, that kept people from exercising their democratic rights. We know that women weren't given the right to vote until in the 20th century, which is just crazy. So we know this is a racial issue and a racial justice issue, and we stand behind it because we believe that everyone should have an equal right to vote. And then the third thing is, there are a lot of issues we care about. We care, and they're different for all of us. Some of us care about climate change. Some of us care about immigrant rights. Some of us care about homelessness and many, many other issues. Here's what we know. The electorate does not match the general population, right? The people who vote is a different group of people than the overall population, right? It is the people who vote are whiter, older, and more conservative than the general population. And what we know is the people who are elected are responsive to the people who vote, right? And if you don't vote, then they're not responsive to you. If the electorate if the electorate reflected the general population, it all of a sudden would become possible to pass all sorts of different measures that keep to Jewish values. Now, this is not a partisan point, and we are not partisan in this. And this is very clear. Like, we're not talking about, well, this would elect more of one party and less of the other. What we're saying is that if we change the electorate, people of all parties would be more responsive to the issues we care about. So let me tell you where things are now. This has been a dramatic year, and maybe not a very positive one for voting rights. So the first thing to know, as many of you know, this is reviewed for many of us, in 49 states have passed 440 laws limiting the right to vote, making it harder for people to vote. And this, again, is a racial justice issue, right? The lines to vote in African-American communities and Latino communities, it's longer. You have to wait. There are fewer places to vote. You have to travel further. You have to wait in longer lines, right? There are obstacles that are put in way. There are voter ID laws, right, that require people to spend money on IDs that impact low-income people more. There's reduced voting hours. There's elimination of polling locations. There's also all these laws, right? And there's a sort of big lie out there that says that there was massive voter fraud in the last election. And that these laws are necessary to combat. But that is just not true. There have been like hundreds of court cases where people challenge the election results. And in none of these court cases were people able to present evidence of massive fraud, more than a few cases, fraud that at a level that would have changed the results, right? There is no evidence of that. They had a chance to present it. They didn't. When they did an audit under the least favorable terms for the election results in Arizona, they still couldn't find evidence of fraud that would have been sufficient to overturn it. There is no evidence of fraud. So that's a big lie. These laws are designed to exclude people, especially African Americans, other people of color, low-income people, young people. They're designed to make it harder to vote in order to change the electorate. So there have been two bills that the reform movement has supported. One is the Freedom to Vote bill, which is a kind of a omnibus bill that has a bunch of voting rights issues in it. The second is the John Lewis Freedom to Vote Act, which was a bill that dealt specifically with racial discrimination in voting. As you know, there was a Voting Rights Act in 1965 that really equaled things, ended a lot of the Jim Crow practices that kept African Americans from voting. The Supreme Court has gutted many of the measures of that, and this bill was designed to strengthen and return the Voting Rights Act to its effectiveness it had before. The reform movement worked actively in support of these bills. We did 50 meetings with senators across this country. And how many of you met with the senators or their staff here in California? Were any of you part of the meetings? Because we did do meetings here in California. You all may or may not have been part of them. We really pushed for this bill. It got as close as it could get without passing. So first of all, it got enough votes to pass. There were 50 people who supported it. So if there was a straight majority vote, it would have run with 50 votes plus when it's a tie, the vice president cast the tie and the vice president was in favor. So there was a majority supporting this bill. But the rules of the Senate say that you need 60 votes to pass the filibuster, right? Despite the fact that there's nothing about the filibuster of the Constitution, the founders explicitly rejected such a measure, and it's been used to fight against racial justice, the filibuster, since its founding. But the filibuster is still there. Brought it up to change the filibuster. We needed 50 votes to change the filibuster, but we only got 48. So we were not able to change the filibuster. Therefore, we were not able to pass these bills. And unfortunately, they are dead for this year. So what is next? Well, the bills are dead for this year, but we're going to keep fighting. We know that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 did not pass in 1 year. It was a multi-year campaign to pass it. And we are engaged in a multi-year campaign to change the voting rules to make them fair everywhere in the country. So we will keep working on that. But this year, we're turning our attention from changing the laws to saying, all right, we have the laws that we have. What we need to do is make sure that people turn out in large numbers despite whatever obstacles are in the way. So we will be doing campaigns similar to what we did in 2020 that some of you participated in. We will be reaching out directly to voters in states with restrictive laws and practices. And we're going to be reaching out to voters who are from those groups that have been excluded, young people, African Americans, other people of color. And we're going to be reaching out, urging people to vote. We're not, as I say, completely nonpartisan. We are not telling people who to vote for. We are not reaching out to people that support one candidate or another. We are reaching out to everyone who is in groups that have been tended to be excluded to say, you need to vote. These are the rules. These are what you need to do to overcome the obstacle. Secondly, we'll be publicizing and we'll be protesting voter suppression practices in states to the degree that that's possible. The third thing is there's work to do in California. California has really good voting rules, but even with good voting rules, African Americans and young people and other people of color are still underrepresented in the electorate, and there are efforts to reach out and try and change that. So you can participate in this through RAC California, which is the statewide social justice effort of the reform movement. Right now, RAC California is researching a 2 to 3 year campaign around either climate change or housing or homelessness. That's what we're looking at. And RAC California will be leading the participation in California in the National Reform Movement Voter Engagement Campaign that will launch in May or June and continue through the election. And finally, the best way to get involved is through your congregation here. And Congregation Beth Shalom, we are hoping, will be very active on this campaign. So you can kind of participate in two ways. One is you could join the social action team, right? We need more people to help plan the voter actions in your congregation. And even more important is reaching out to people to invite them in so that all of your congregation participates, or as many as possible. Secondly, and you may not want to join the social action team. You might say, look, I'm not a social action team joiner, but I want to come. Let me know when the voter actions are and I will show up, right? So those are the two ways to participate. So I would urge you now to write in the chat if you are interested in joining the social action team, or if you are interested in participating in voter engagement actions once they get planned in the late summer or the fall. And then the social action team will know to reach out to you when it happens. So if you could write that in the chat, that would be great. Okay. So in closing, I just wanted to close with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And this quote is from a speech he gave in 1957 when he was working for voting rights. So one thing to be aware of is he gave the speech in 1957. The Voting Rights Act bill didn't pass till 1965, right? Another 8 years, right? So first he talked about how important this is. He said, and I'm going to use the word for African Americans that he used that was common at the time, because I'm quoting him. He said, all types of conniving methods are still being used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. The denial of this sacred right is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic tradition, right? What's sad about this quote is how it's still true, that there are all sorts of conniving methods that are denying African Americans the right to vote, right? But he said, and he knew that it wasn't going to pass that year. He knew it was going to be a struggle, and it was going to take years. And so he said to people, there is something in our faith that says to us, never despair, never give up, never feel that the cause of righteousness and justice is doomed. So there are a lot of discouraging things we read in the news today, not just the defeat of these two voting bills in the Senate, but many, many discouraging things. But we can't give up. We can't give in to despair. We need to keep working until the cause of righteousness and justice succeeds. So thank you.
Lee, thank you so much. I kind of just drinking in your words and really appreciate having an action item to follow up on. I want to open up for the community that's here this evening if they have some questions for you. Yeah, we have Bob Bennett with a question.
Yeah, Lee, as you've listened to people around the country and you're listening to liberal and conservatives and so forth, what do you hear from people who support these voter suppression bills? Why are they so adamant in supporting them? What's the compelling um, reason that these are popular amongst a certain segment of our population?
Well, you've even heard some of the people who support these measures, some of the politicians actually say this directly, that they feel they cannot win if everyone votes. And so what they want to do is keep the electorate narrow and whiter and older because they feel that that favors them. And they feel that if they do measures, look, measures like mail-in ballots have been around for decades. And some states, not just California is relatively new, but other states have been doing it for a long time, including states like Utah that are pretty conservative. They've been having everyone votes for mail. And you don't have to ask, right? And Republicans have used mail-in voting more than Democrats. All of a sudden it becomes like, well, somehow it's suspect. So I'm sure there are people that genuinely believe that there is voter fraud. And it would be easy to do that because you hear it all the time. From certain politicians and certain news stations are saying this big lie that there's this massive voting fraud. So I'm sure a lot of people genuinely support this because they are worried about voter fraud. But I do think that the people who are leading this are doing it cynically in order to try and keep the electorate narrow so they can keep and stay in office.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, we have a question from Nick Alexander.
Right, thank you. Mr. Winkleman, I spent about 9 years ago, I spent a spring around the state legislature here, and I went to the voting, the committees on elections, both in the Senate and Assembly. And what I came away understanding is that, like the Democrats in this state 9 years ago are for opening things up, making it easier to vote. I mean, not just easier, but to try to ensure access to voting, whereas the Republicans, like on the committee and otherwise in the legislature, were basically their efforts were to restrict voting, partly with the idea of to prevent fraud. But now we're in this period where the previous occupant of the White House, not to mention his name, where he, as you know very well, he carried this to a great extreme nationwide. And my question is, are we going to get out of this cycle? Is it possible?
Well, that is a really, really good question. I want to say two things. First, I want to say this is really not a partisan issue. And when you look over time, you can look at, Democrats have gerrymandered and Republicans have gerrymandered. And at times, Republicans have been more for openness and Democrats have been less for openness. So over time, it has been both parties that have been both ways. So this is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of democracy and values and fairness. And we're, in favor of these things, no matter which party it helps. It's not about helping one party or the other. But it is reason to despair. Seem like there's stronger voices than there have been, in the last, in my adult memory, really, that are fighting to narrow voting and anti-democratic things. And it is really scary times. I don't know that it's scarier than 1957 when Martin Luther King, was fighting for this. And so I do take his words to heart that we can't despair even in the scary moments, and that if we keep fighting, things will pass, as the voting rights did pass in 1965. And I think if you looked in 1957, you would have felt really despairing of it passing, but it did pass. So I do believe that if we keep working for democratic values, that we will in the end prevail. You're muted, Rabbi.
That's that's the language, right? It's thinking about the Torah portion and the making the near tamid and the pure olive oil and the effort done, and it's got to be right, and you can't, you need people of integrity to monitor it. And when I hear you speak this last statement about this hope, it just feels like there's this blast of light coming from your square on my screen. Any other comments for Lee this evening? Questions? Perhaps if some of you see it differently than how it's presented, you would be able to share your views as well so that they can also be heard.
I certainly welcome people with different views than the ones I presented today. So I would encourage people to speak up.
Good.
I don't have a different view, but I am so grateful to you for sharing hope. Really, really grateful. Thank you.
I just wanted to say the same thing. I don't have a different view, but I feel so comforted to hear you saying never give up, never despair. That's so needed right now. And I don't think it can be said enough. So it's so helpful.
What it's going to take is all of us, in this congregation, in the Reform movement, and then in our allies in other faiths and classes and races, all working together to make this happen. But if we work together, peace will come.
I have a question for you, and perhaps you said it, and if I missed it,
that's okay.
How many states are we seeing that are really creating this big obstacle for us to have, access, all of us, to be able to cast our vote? How many states are we looking at that are?
Let me because I'm just looking at my notes, and I think I wrote, I distrust what I wrote down, so I'm looking this up again. It is I think it's 29 states, and there were 400 laws that have passed to limit voting in one way or another. Some of them, more egregiously than others. And we have RAC California here in California, we have RAC Texas and RAC Florida, who have been fighting against, so far unsuccessfully, but they're not giving up, fighting against these laws in their states that are their two states that have passed really particularly restrictive laws.
It's also comforting to know that we have the Religious Action Center in those states.
Yeah. The Religious Action Center has state projects in 9 states. And then, of course, we work with people in other states as well.
Okay.
And RAC California, by the way, was the first. So people keep looking to RAC California for its leadership. It was our first state project.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm hoping, Deborah, are you the one who will be helping us link our names to what we put in the chat, or no?
No, that's not me.
Okay. So
I'm writing down. I'm writing down the names.
So we have a question from Harriet about what are the other states that have the Religious Action Center
Have state projects for the Religious Action Center, because we do work in all states where they're Jews, but we don't necessarily have a dedicated staff person, and we don't have the structure that RAC California has. So we have California, Illinois, Ohio, New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Florida, and Texas.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much for telling me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you. Just another plug for our Social Action Committee and the things that, we care deeply about, and when actions come up or if we can be involved with that, and you see it on our emails about what's going on, I encourage all of us on this call to take the next step.
Rabbi, I just
Yeah.
wanted to mention for the congregation that Lee Winkleman's colleague, Rabbi Julie Sachs-Taller, will be at the Social Action Committee meeting this Thursday. Everyone is welcome. You do not have to be a member of the Social Action Committee. Certainly, we'd love you to be members of the Social Action Committee, but she's going to be talking to us about how we can make some decisions among the many valued activities and campaigns that are out there in terms of where we want to put our energies.
Can I just say, Rabbi Julie Sextaler is really wonderful. She's the lead organizer for RAC California. She's just great. You'll really love getting a chance to talk with her at that meeting.
So that meeting next Thursday at 7:00 is open to all of us, and we'll make sure we who try to stay on top of our communication will make sure that you have access to that link. And I would encourage you to please come, as I've heard such great things about her. I think that would be great for us to see how she navigates the many issues that are out there. Anyone else before we move toward Social Action Committee meeting 217? Yep, that's right. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Lee, for being with us and shining light, being a Ner Tamid over there. And we have to do that with each other and across this country of ours.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to spend Shabbat evening with you all, and may the rest of your Shabbat be a really restful and meaningful one for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. All right. So, folks, our service is not over. I wanted to invite Roy to give the announcements, if you would, and we'll put that on the screen, Rick. Thank you. I'm sure they're coming. There we go. Thank you. Roy, you're on.
Sure. Thank you again to tonight's speaker, Lee Winkleman. A reminder again that if you're having trouble getting emails, to reach out to Jenny Jeffries, and she can help you work out and check if things are getting lost in your spam folder. Shabbat services continue to be in person along with Zoom and live stream on the first and third Friday night of each month, and Zoom live stream only on the second and fourth Friday nights. Reminder for those activities that we do have in person, both the first and third Friday night Shabbat services, as well as Neshama on Sundays, that we are requiring, if you participate in those activities, that you've been vaccinated for COVID. If we don't already have on file proof of your vaccination, including a booster, please send that to Jenny Jeffries, that administrator at CB Shalom, and do bring those cards with you to services if we don't already have you listed. Torah service tomorrow will be at 9 a.m. And on Zoom. And tomorrow night, I think we have more than 10 young congregation members and their parents and grandparents joining us for a pajama Havdalah. It'll be from 6 to 7. And there'll be crafts and cookies, and the kids are all encouraged to bring stuffed animals, their pajamas, and just enjoy fellow congregants celebrating the end of Shabbat. On Sunday, February 13th, Neshama is in session. That's this Sunday at 9 o'clock. And there will be Purim rehearsals from 1 to 2 or 2:30 for those in the Purim Spiel. It's going well. We're having fun rehearsing every Sunday. The next social action meeting, as already announced, will be this upcoming Thursday at 7 o'clock on Zoom. And if you go to the CBS website, you'll find a link to that meeting. Next Friday, back in person in Zoom for Shabbat with a Beat, and that's at 7 p.m. I think many of you may have already received a phone call or had a message on your answering machine if she wasn't able to reach you. From Maria Adler, she's our new community coordinator and trying to add a personal touch of phone calls to the emails that we've been sending people to remind you about all the different opportunities that you have to engage with CBS and to know about activities that are going on. And never too soon to write on your calendar if you haven't done so already. The Sunday before Rosh Hashanah, September 18th, will be our annual food fair. And if you want to get involved, please send a note to Jenny Jeffrey, administrator at cbshalom.org. We're having a planning meeting this Wednesday at 7 p.m. And if you want to join that, please send either Jenny or me a note, and we will send you a link to join for that planning meeting. And I think that's it for the announcements.
That's great. You know, I want to just remind us that we Carrie's birthday was yesterday, and she joyfully reached 100 years old, and we pray for many, 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 many more years. And our celebration for her is in the works for spring, and the date is will be announced very soon. For now, I invite us to get ready to stand for Aleinu, followed by our Kaddish prayer. Please stand. Aleinu l'shaveach ladon hakol, latet gdula liotze bereshit. שלא עשינו כגויי הרצות ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובהי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו וידעת היום והשבותה אל לבבך. כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחתנו. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. If you're standing, please be seated. If your loved one's name is said, you might please honor them by standing. And if they're, after I read the Kaddish, the 11th month list of those who have died in the 11 months and the Yortzites, if there are other names, I would be very happy to read them in memory. We remember Victor Gabriel, Etta Brody, Jen Garcia, Mark Kane, Ami Lustig, Carl Saperstein, Emma Ronquillo Nalangan, Bob Unger, Bill Jenkins, Linda Clark, Sergeant Beryl Hadera Shmuli, Raquel Kagan de Apasoa, Dennis Mathet, Sandra Jeffrey, Florenciano Carbajal, Nancy Ann Sutter, Charlie Hilty, Murray Fink, Maria Pellegrino Eisner, Sheila Sugarman, Nancy Norton Fleischman, Raul Saavedra, Leroy Davis, and Sarah Everard. And we remember those whose yard site falls on this Shabbat: Edward Duke, Stanley Hassman, Raquel Bienvenida Yabif Segura, Harry Lessinger, Ann Finder Levine, Barbara Ann Levy Bertassini, Rhonda Lewis, Jack Mendelson, David Navi, David Nolan, Harry Redler, Mort Sachs, Sarah Schultz, Ernest Simon, Ed Woods, Pat Poole. If there are any other names, you can either say them out loud or write them in the chat. Zichronam Livracha, may all their memories be for a blessing, and may their souls be at peace. We stand as one family for the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalel shemei dekudasha b'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Oseh shalom, 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 bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom, 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 bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imeru amen. Just a reminder about that last line, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. It means for all who inhabit this creation, to which we say amen. Please be seated. It would be a great time to pour yourself a glass of fruit of the vine, or however you interpret that to be, juice, wine, water, however it is. We thank God for vineyards are so beautiful, aren't they? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'avav ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta v'otanu kidashta b'kol hamim, v'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. L'chaim. You know, sometimes when we have our Shabbat, our social justice Shabbat, the song that comes to mind to conclude it is Ani V'Ata, written long ago by Arik Einstein, I believe, and reminds us of our ability to keep going and continue to be that light, right? That Ner Tamid. And when we were listening to Lee speak, and he said, you know, we didn't get, the votes didn't happen this time. We didn't get to pass it, but we're not giving up. So that's the message of this, Ani V'Ata. And once again, big thank you to Rick Snyder for your wonderful work in collaborating with images, and to Lucy and to Susan for helping, for inspiring us with these wonderful speakers. Thank you. And for all of you who are here, a sweet Shabbat. Ani ve'ata nishane et ha'olam. Ani ve'ata az yavo kuvar kulam. Amru eze kodem lefanai ze lo mishane. Ani ve'ata nishane et ha'olam. Ani ve'ata nenase mechatchala. Yihye lanu ra, ein davar ze lo nora. Amru et zet kodem lefanai ze lo mishane. Ani ve'ata nishane et ha'olam. You and I will change the world. You and I, by then, all will follow. Others have said it before me, but it doesn't matter. You and I will change the world. You and I will try from the beginning. It will be tough for us. No matter, it's not too bad. Others have said it before me. Doesn't matter. You and I will change the world. Amru et ze kodem lefanai ze lo mishane. Ani ve'ata nishane et ha'olam. So Rick, put us on gallery so we can say Shabbat Shalom to each other, and Shabbat Shalom. And Heidi, I love it when you're there, when you call us out and give our names and say Shabbat Shalom. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hello, everyone from
Shabbat
Harry.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Deborah, welcome. Deborah, welcome. Good to
Thank
see
you. Is that Susan?
That's me.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for your birthday wishes.
Oh, yes.
When is your birthday?
It was the 9th.
Ah, happy birthday to you. Come back and be with us again. It's a delight to have you here.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I feel very welcomed.
Shabbat Shalom, the Hucklebees.
Wonderful to be here.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Torah study tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's going to be
Shabbat
happening.
Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom, Harriet, dear. Shabbat Shalom.
Good to see everybody. Look, this Roy disappeared.
Shabbat Shalom.